When a woman finally stops explaining herself, when she no longer feels the compulsive need to be understood, to be chosen, to be reassured, something profound awakens within her. It is not pride, not arrogance, but power. And it begins in the quiet. In the moment, she chooses silence over begging solitude, over chaos, self-worth over chasing. It is a moment that seems small from the outside, but it is tectonic from within. Carl Jung said that your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. And this awakening is not gentle. It burns. Because it's not about becoming a colder woman. It's about becoming a truer one. You stop needing to perform for a love that leaves you empty. You stop rehearsing worthiness for someone who could replace you in an instant. And instead, you look at yourself in the mirror, not to fix, but to witness. For the first time, you become your own observer. And in that gaze, the man who left begins to feel your absence, not as silence, but as a force. Because when a woman turns inward and meets the depth of her own being, she begins broadcasting on a frequency that no man can ignore, not even one who is already with someone else. This isn't manipulation. This is transformation. And it begins when you stop chasing the man and start becoming the woman he thought he could replace. There is a sacred psychology in the way a woman detaches. It is not the same as disappearance. It is not revenge. It is not a tactic. It is a complete shift in energy. She stops orbiting around the need to be validated and starts becoming the center of her own gravity. And that shift, though invisible, moves mountains. Men can sense it long before they understand it. Because the woman who was once predictable, always available, emotionally open, suddenly becomes unknown. And what is unknown becomes magnetic. She is no longer explaining why she deserves love. She is embodying it. Jung taught us that we all wear masks, the persona, but beneath it is something wild, untamed, eternal, the self. And when a woman returns to the self, she becomes frighteningly beautiful, not in the way that decorates a room, but in the way that haunts a memory. When he thinks of her now, he doesn't just remember her body or her voice. He remembers how safe it felt to be adored by her, how warm it felt to be seen through her eyes. But now, those eyes are looking inward, and in their place is silence. Not the cold silence of punishment, but the rich silence of rebirth. She no longer fills the space with explanations, apologies, or reminders. She lets absence do what words never could. And while he fills his nights with distractions with someone new, who doesn't challenge his ego, he begins to feel the pull of what he cannot name, the emotional scarcity of a woman who no longer needs to be chosen to know her worth. Emotional scarcity is not about withholding, it's about redefining value. What is rare becomes precious. What is no longer available becomes sacred. And the woman who once gave love as if it were a discount now offers it like art, selectively, truthfully, and only to those who see it for what it is. When a woman reclaims herself, she no longer gives away her energy cheaply. She no longer texts first just to feel remembered. She no longer checks his stories to feel connected. Because she has remembered something deeper than attention, she has remembered her essence, and that remembrance is the real seduction. Not red lipstick, not perfectly timed replies, but emotional independence. The aura of a woman who is at peace with herself. Men feel this shift. Even when they act like they don't. Even when they smile beside another woman. Even when they post pictures pretending to have moved on. They feel it at night, in the quiet, when the mask falls and the truth creeps in, that no matter how charming she is not you. She does not make him feel like he mattered to the universe. She does not know the exact way your silence felt, and that absence becomes a wound. The Jungian shadow begins to stir within him, the realization that he projected his fears onto you, blamed you for needing too much, when in fact he feared giving so little. And now, in your silence, he feels small, because for the first time, he is no longer the center of your world. You are, and that changes everything. Not because you hoped it would, but because you chose yourself and meant it. In the alchemy of rebirth, there is always a death. A death of the girl who thought she had to be perfect to be loved. A death of the woman who thought she had to shrink to be chosen. And that death is not graceful. It comes with sobbing on the floor, with deleted drafts of texts never sent, with long nights that feel like eternity. But on the other side of that death is a woman who is no longer waiting. She is not waiting for closure, not waiting for apologies, not waiting for the one who left to return. She is living, fully, not performatively, not in curated Instagram photos, but in the raw, sacred truth of her becoming. And this becoming is magnetic in a way that can't be faked. It is what men notice without understanding. It is the shift in your walk, your tone, your energy. It is the way you no longer look to be seen, but you are, everywhere you go, because your energy now speaks for you. This is not magic. It is depth, and it is terrifying to the shallow. It is confronting to the ego, and to the man who thought you'd always be there, it is a revelation. He begins to replay memories, not the dramatic fights or the goodbyes, but the small things, your laugh when you weren't looking, the way you understood his silence, the way your presence made his world feel meaningful. And now he finds himself in a new relationship, but haunted by a woman who no longer needs him. A ghost of the emotional home he once had, not because you vanished, but because you rose. You do not need to hope he comes back. You do not need to beg the universe for signs. You only need to become so profoundly whole that if he does come back, he meets a version of you that doesn't ask for love, but chooses whether it's worthy of her. That is the final truth. The moment of return is never about him. It is about you. Will you still need his validation? Or will you have built a temple so strong within yourself that no man's approval could ever rebuild what he once destroyed? This is not about making him beg. It's about becoming the woman who no longer begs. And that shift, sister, is the most powerful invitation for return that exists. Not because you lured him, but because you outgrew the need for him. And in that space, ripe with silence, rich with sovereignty, you hold the final word. And the final word is never said out loud. It is lived in how you move, in who you become, in the life you build. He may come back. They often do. But when he does, you will no longer be waiting with open arms. You will be standing in your fullness, deciding whether the man before you is worthy of the woman you have finally become. Because the woman you have finally become is not a memory, she is a revolution. She is not defined by who left her, but by who she refused to become in their absence. She didn't just survive the silence. She sculpted herself within it. Every time she chose not to send the message, she rewrote her self-respect. Every time she felt the sting of loneliness and didn't run back, she expanded her emotional capacity. And now she walks not to be followed, but because her soul is moving forward. And anything that cannot keep up with her pace is naturally left behind. She doesn't speak to be heard anymore. She speaks to express truth. And sometimes that truth is silence itself. She doesn't dress to be desired. She dresses to reflect the dignity she carries. She doesn't perform feminine softness to soothe fragile egos. She embodies a divine femininity that bends for no one and flows with everything. This isn't empowerment born from Instagram quotes. This is the raw empowerment that comes from being broken, discarded, misunderstood, and deciding to rise anyway. This is what Carl Jung meant when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Not who he wanted, not who society praised, who you truly are. And when a woman steps into that place, not only does he feel her absence, but he begins to feel unworthy of her return. Because he knows the woman who now breathes in her power has no desire to relive the version of herself who begged for scraps. And still, there is no bitterness in her eyes, no revenge, no need to prove anything. Because when a woman is truly healed, she no longer desires to be right, she desires to be real. And being real means seeing clearly who he was, who she was, and who she is now. With no delusion, no fantasy. Just truth. The truth that she may have loved him, from a place of longing, from the hope that he'd choose her. But she now chooses herself, with a love so deep, it rewrites the laws of every relationship she enters from here on. She no longer asks, will he come back? She asks, will he deserve to return? And often the answer is no. Because real growth brings clarity, and clarity reveals what was tolerated under the illusion of love. She sees now how her anxiety was mistaken for passion, how his silence was romanticized into mystery, how being emotionally starved was normalized as a test of strength, but not anymore. Now she knows love is not meant to wound and then watch you bleed. Love is not meant to disappear, so you'll chase. Love is not meant to be earned through sacrifice. Love that must be begged for is not love. It's an addiction. And she is finally sober. She walks away, not because she hates him, but because she loves herself too much to stay where she is no longer blooming. And this decision, made in silence, echoes louder than any speech. Because the soul does not speak in words. It speaks in alignment, in energy. And the woman in alignment needs no closure. She is the closure. So he watches, maybe from afar, maybe pretending not to care. But he watches. He hears about her. He sees her photos, ones not curated to attract him, but to honor her new joy. He hears from mutual friends how she's changed. And something in him begins to ache. Not because she is gone, but because she is gone without him. Because she didn't just move on. She evolved. She didn't wait for his apology to heal. She didn't wait for his permission to glow. And now, in her freedom, he sees everything he didn't see before. The patience that once calmed his storms. The forgiveness that once softened his guilt. The presence that once made him feel like more than he was. He remembers how she looked at him like he mattered. And now, no one looks at him like that anymore. Not even the woman he's with. Because that gaze was not something she gave to everyone, it was sacred. And now, it's his absence from her life, not his presence, that defines him. Because she has turned his silence into a sanctuary. She has turned his rejection into rebirth. She has turned herself into something untouchable, not cold, not cruel, but so whole, so radiant, that to approach her now requires more than words. It requires work. And he knows deep down he may never be enough for the woman she has become. That perhaps is the price of not recognizing her worth when it was freely given. And so the irony unfolds. The woman who once begged him to stay has now become the woman he cannot forget. Not because she punished him, not because she played games, but because she did what few ever do. She healed. She faced the wound instead of running from it. She stared at the broken pieces of her identity and with trembling hands began to reassemble them. Not into the same shape, but into something new. Stronger, wiser, softer, yes, but not naive. Tender, yes, but not tolerant of disrespect. And now her softness is a choice, not a default. Her tenderness is sacred, not available to all. And in this version of her, there is no room for emotional beggars, only equals. Only those who meet her, not with promises, but with presence. Not with apologies, but with consistency. And to the man who left thinking he'd find better, she has only one message, not spoken, but lived. You will never again find the version of me who loved you before I knew myself. That woman is gone. She loved you before she learned how to love herself. And now that she does, she no longer chooses pain disguised as passion. She no longer finds romance in being tolerated. And to win her back is not to charm her, it is to match her. Her energy, her clarity, her depth. Anything less is invisible to her now. And that invisibility is the most haunting feeling of all. So remember this, sister. When you choose to stop begging, when you choose silence over performance, when you choose growth over obsession, you are not just healing. You are becoming unforgettable. Not because he desires you, but because you finally desire yourself. That is the real seduction. The woman who walks not to be chased, but because she's being pulled by something far more powerful than a man's attention, her own destiny. And when a woman aligns with her destiny, when she falls in love with her own reflection, not because it's flawless, but because it's true, she becomes a force, a storm in stillness, a light in her own darkness. And the man who let her go, he does not chase her because she called. He chases because he can no longer find her energy anywhere else. It is rare. It is sacred. It is gone. And in that void, he is left with one echo, the sound of a woman reclaiming her soul. That is your power. That is your return. Not to him, but to you. Because your return to yourself is the only reunion that truly matters. You don't need a man to come back in order to feel complete. You need to come back to the woman you were before you handed your power away. And even more than that, you need to meet the version of yourself that you've never been allowed to fully become. The woman who no longer folds herself into silence to be acceptable. The woman who doesn't sacrifice her truth for connection. The woman who doesn't ask, am I enough for him, but asks, is he capable of meeting the depth I now live in? This shift doesn't happen overnight. It comes in waves. Waves of pain, waves of awakening, waves of radical honesty. But if you ride them instead of resisting them, they'll carry you home. Not to a place, not to a person, but to a state of being where you no longer abandon yourself just to be chosen. That is the most terrifying truth for the man who left. Because when he realizes you're no longer his to return to, he doesn't just grieve the relationship, he grieves the version of you who still needed him. He sees now that what he left wasn't weakness. It was a woman still in the process of remembering who she was. And now that you remember, he is no longer your destination. He's just part of the journey that led you back to yourself. Carl Jung wrote, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. And you, sister, are now choosing. Not out of fear, Not out of scarcity, not because someone finally came back begging, but because you're done begging yourself to stay small. You're done apologizing for wanting more, for being intense, for asking for emotional presence. You're done shrinking your needs just to make room for someone else's convenience. You now live with a clarity that is sharp enough to cut through fantasy. You no longer build castles from crumbs. You build boundaries. You build standards. You build a life where your love is an extension of your wholeness, not a plea for completion. And from this place, everything changes. You no longer obsess over his silence. You no longer decode his texts. You no longer look to see if he watched your stories. You're too busy living your own. And the irony is, that is when he starts watching, not because you're trying to be seen, but because your light has grown so fierce, it can't be ignored. And whether he's still with someone else or alone in his guilt, he will feel the absence of your energy like a winter wind, quiet, piercing, unforgettable. But this story, your story, isn't about him anymore. It never really was. It was about how you lost yourself for love and then found something deeper than love identity. It was about how you mistook emotional abandonment for passion and then realized passion without safety is just chaos. It was about how you begged to be chosen by someone who didn't even choose himself, and how in the ashes of that betrayal you rose, not polished, not perfect, but whole. There's no going back now. Not because you've hardened, but because you've softened into truth. And the truth is, you are not the same woman. The woman who would have said yes too quickly, who would have excused too much, who would have waited too long, she is no more. In her place stands someone else entirely. A woman who can be alone and not feel lonely. A woman who chooses herself in small ways every single day. A woman who no longer feels the need to prove she is worthy of being loved, because now she knows she is loved, is. And anyone who wants access to that love must rise to meet it, not pull it down into drama manipulation or convenience. So if he ever does come back, and many do, it won't be to the same situation. He will arrive with memories of a woman he once knew. But he will stand before someone completely new, someone whose silence was not weakness, but rebirth, someone whose absence was not absence, but sacred realignment, someone who no longer asks, "Do you still love me?" but who asks herself, "Do I still want him in my world?" That's the final shift. That's the return of your authority. And from that place, you make choices not from your wounds, but from your wisdom. Not from your fear, but from your freedom. Not to fill a void, but to share your light. And if he cannot honor that he is not losing you, he is losing access to the most awakened, integrated, powerful version of you he could have ever witnessed. But now that power is no longer his to observe. It is yours to embody every day, with every choice, with every breath. Let that be the reason you stop waiting. Not because it's too late for him, but because it's finally time for you. Because all along, you were not meant to be found by someone else. You were meant to find yourself. And now that you have, nothing is missing. Nothing is broken. And no man, no matter how charming, no matter how apologetic, no matter how persistent, can offer you something more precious than what you have finally claimed your own soul, unshaken, undefeated, and entirely yours. Let him watch. Let him wonder. Let him reach out. But let your silence remind him, the woman who once begged for love is now a woman who chooses it with discernment, dignity, and divine clarity. And that is what makes her unforgettable. And this unforgettable woman doesn't just carry beauty, she radiates presence. Not the presence that performs, pleases, or persuades. The presence that simply is. Rooted, grounded, certain. There is no rush in her breath, no anxiety in her stillness. She no longer asks, "Will he choose me?" because the deeper truth is, she is the one who chooses. She is the mirror he can no longer avoid. Because in her, he sees what he could have had if only he had grown sooner. He sees the reflection of every version of himself. He refused to confront his shadow, his avoidance, his fear of intimacy, his need to dominate rather than connect. Carl Jung taught us that we attract not what we want, but what we are. And now, she is no longer the unhealed girl, waiting for someone to make her whole. She is the woman who integrated her pain into purpose. Her love is no longer a currency she trades for scraps of affection. It's a sacred offering she shares with those who are ready to receive it fully. That is why he aches now. Because her love was never the problem. It was the depth of her love that terrified him. And now, standing in the shallows of his next relationship, he feels it what's missing. Not just her touch, but her truth. Not just her smile, but her soul. He may try to come back. He may reach out with half-sincere apologies masked as check-ins. He may test the waters with nostalgia, with guilt, with memories that once held power. But this time, she's not the same. She doesn't take the bait. She doesn't respond with longing. She doesn't confuse attention with transformation. Because now she knows real change doesn't show up as a late-night message. It shows up as consistent presence integrity and emotional responsibility. And unless he returns not to relive the past, but to meet her in the present, he will not find the door open. Not because she closed it in bitterness, but because she now guards her peace like a temple. The temple she built from ruins. The temple where her intuition now lives. He cannot enter that sacred space without shedding the ego that once destroyed it. And most cannot. That is why she no longer waits. Because healing revealed the truth, it was never about being chosen by him. It was about choosing herself so completely that anyone not aligned with her truth simply dissolves in her absence. This isn't the kind of power you flaunt. It's the kind that moves quietly through a room and changes the atmosphere. It's not loud. It's not aggressive. But it is undeniable. Because when a woman comes back to herself after being emotionally abandoned, something inside her crystallizes. And she no longer flinches at red flags. She no longer entertains emotional crumbs. She no longer doubts what her gut whispers in the silence. She becomes the embodiment of clarity. And that clarity cuts through every manipulation, every excuse, every almost. She sees through charm. She recognizes patterns. She remembers the cost of self-abandonment, and she refuses to pay that price again. He may wonder if she still thinks of him. And the truth is, she doesn't in the same way. She may remember him, but not with longing, with gratitude. Gratitude for the role he played in her awakening. Gratitude for the pain that revealed her strength. Gratitude for the distance that created the space she needed to grow. But she does not want him back. She wants forward. And forward has no place for the past that could not hold her. This kind of rebirth is irreversible. Because once a woman finds her voice in the silence, she never returns to the noise. Once she tastes the peace of emotional self-sufficiency, she cannot be seduced by chaos. Once she sees herself not as a half waiting to be completed, but as a whole, overflowing with truth, she becomes dangerous to every man who seeks to control her. And irresistible to every soul who's ready to rise with her. Her magnetism is no longer tied to her appearance, but to her presence, to the way she listens deeply without losing herself, to the way she speaks truth without fear, to the way she leaves when something no longer honors her. That is the woman he cannot forget. Not because she chased him, but because she released him, with dignity, with silence, with a love that said, I see you, but I will not lose myself for you. And in that release, she ascended. She stopped arguing for her worth. She started living it. She stopped making room for the unready. She started becoming a sanctuary for the ready. So if you're in that space right now, hurting, doubting, tempted to reach out, pause, breathe, return, not to him, but to you. Sit in the discomfort. Let the silence do its work. Let it teach you what noise never could. Let it break you open so something real can be born. Because this isn't about getting him back. It's about never again leaving yourself behind. And when you choose that path, not once, but every day, you'll realize the greatest love story was never the one you lost. It's the one you're writing now. The one where you are both the author and the heroine. The one where you rise not for revenge, but for reverence. The one where you are no longer chasing someone to come back, but becoming someone who never left herself again. Because at the end of it all, after the silence, the tears, the long nights, and the slow rebuilding, you come to one final truth. You were never waiting for him. You were waiting for you. The real you. The one who had been buried under the performance of being lovable, the one who twisted herself into shapes she hated just to fit into the narrow frame of someone else's acceptance. The one who thought love meant sacrifice, silence, and self-erasure. That version of you she was hurting, but she was also brave. Because even in that pain, she carried the seeds of the woman you are now. And now standing here, with no need to chase, no craving for validation, no fantasy to resurrect, you realize you are free. Not because he left, not because he might return, but because you finally stopped waiting for someone to show up and did the only thing that ever mattered. You showed up for yourself. Fully, fiercely, without apology. You didn't just get over him. You transcended the entire paradigm that made his love feel like oxygen. You no longer breathe through someone else's presence. You breathe in your own life now, deeply, proudly, and you carry within you a peace no man can disturb, not because your heart is closed, but because it is finally guarded by wisdom. And this wisdom isn't loud. It doesn't need to announce itself. It's the quiet certainty in your step, the calm confidence in your gaze, the way you no longer react to breadcrumbs because you've learned to bake your own bread abundantly. He may still wonder. He may still fantasize. He may still search for the version of you who once bled just to keep him warm. But that version is gone, not with bitterness, but with grace. She outgrew him. And now you no longer fight for a place at someone else's table. You build your own. You no longer dream of being saved. You remember that you were always the savior. And from this truth, your entire life reorients not around pain, but around purpose. Not around scarcity, but around sovereignty. Not around being enough for someone else, but being more than enough for yourself. And the love you offer, now it's rare. It's rooted. It's radiant. It's for those who can meet you in your fullness, not feed off your fragments. So if he comes back, and let's be honest, he probably will, it will not be because you begged. It will be because he finally sees what he was, too blind, too wounded, too immature to recognize the first time a woman who does not beg because she embodies everything he always claimed to be looking for. But now she no longer looks for him. She looks inward. She looks forward. She looks only for those who carry the same depth, the same clarity, the same sacred fire in their chest. And if he cannot meet her there, he will not find her again. Not because she vanished, but because she rose. And no man gets to enter the heart of a woman who has risen unless he's willing to rise too. So breathe, sister. Take this moment and feel it in your bones. You are not the one who lost. You are the one who learned. You are not the one who was left behind. You are the one who was set free, and now you walk with your head high, your energy sacred, and your heart open, but not vulnerable to anything less than truth. Because the woman you become is not waiting for love. She is love. And if he ever stands in front of you again, trembling unsure, hoping for another chance, he will meet not the woman he abandoned, but the woman he awakened. And she will decide, not with resentment, but with the kind of divine stillness that only comes from finally knowing you are already home.